Okay, ready when you are, Mr. Chair.
All right, put up the first slide. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.boston_MPO.org/MPO_DISCRIMINATION. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation if you have one. After roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with the raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. If you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact Betsy Harvey via the chat box or at ehrvey@ctps.org or at 857-702-3701. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact Betsy Harvey of the MPO staff at ehrvey@ctps.org or at 857-702-3701. First item on the agenda is introductions. I'm David Muller and Secretary Jamie Tesler here. Jonathan, please call the roll.
Will do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mass DOT C2. Looks like Marie Rose is just joining us, so I will come back to that. Mass DOT Highway Division.
John Romano here.
Thank you. MBTA.
Good morning. This is Laura Gilmore for the MBTA.
Thank you. Mass Port Authority.
Hi, this is Sarah Lee from Massport.
Great, thank you. Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Hello, Eric Barassa with MAPC.
Thank you. MBTA Advisory Board.
Good morning, Brian Kane, MBTA Advisory Board, representing 176 cities and towns in eastern and central Massachusetts. And I note that I am joined by my colleague Amira Patterson, who will be taking over for me at some point later in the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Regional Transportation Advisory Council.
Hello, Leonard Diggins here. Sorry for the background sound. I'm representing the Advisory Council on behalf of the MBTA Rider Oversight Committee and happy to be here on the Ides of December.
Okay, thank you. I see Marie Rose is here. I will go back. Mass DOT C2.
Marie Rose, representing John Bouchard, Deputy Chief Engineer at the Highway Division.
Great, thank you. Moving on to City of Boston, Boston Transportation Department.
Bill Conroy here, representing Mayor Michelle Wu in the city of Boston.
Wonderful. City of Boston, BPDA.
Jim Fitzgerald with BPDA, representing Mayor Wu in City of Boston.
Great, thank you. At-large city, City of Everett.
Jay Monty, representing Mayor DiMaria in the city of Everett.
Great. At-large city of Newton.
David Kozis, representing Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller in the city of Newton.
Great, thank you. At-large town, Town of Arlington.
Not seeing Claire Ricker.
Okay. I'll move on. At-large town of Brookline.
Todd Corain, representing Select Board Chair Heather Hamilton and Town of Brookline.
Great, thank you. Intercore Committee, City of Somerville.
Tom Bent, representing the City of Somerville and Mayor Katiana Ballantyne and Innicor.
Thank you, Tom. Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, Town of Acton.
Austin Sagano with Town of Acton, representing the Magic Subregion.
Great, thank you. Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham.
Dennis Giambetti, representing Mayor Sinsky in the Metro West region.
Thank you. North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly.
Darlene Wynn, North Shore Task Force and City of Beverly on behalf of Mayor Michael Kay.
Thank you. North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington.
I'm not seeing Melissa Tentoculous.
Okay. South Shore Coalition, Town of Hull.
Jennifer Constable for the Town of Hull, South Shore Coalition.
Thank you. Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Medway.
Peter Pelletier, Town of Midway.
Great. Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Town of Norwood, Neponset River Regional Chamber.
Good morning, Tom O'Rourke from the Town of Norwood, representing the Trick Subregion.
Thank you. And our ex officio members, Federal Highway Administration. Okay, Federal Transit Administration. That calls the roll, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. Next item on the agenda is the chair's report. I do not have one, so we'll go directly to Tegan for the executive director's report. Tegan. Oh, I'm sorry, it's Annette, I think. I said Tegan, but I think it's Annette. Is it Tegan? Is Tegan here?
Sorry, I actually couldn't unmute myself there for a minute.
No worries.
Back to the old days. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I am here to provide the executive director's report. And if we could go to the next slide, Logan. The first thing that I would like to talk about is a staffing change. So one of our staff that you know well is going to be moving on to new endeavors. That's Sandy Johnston. He's been with us for 6 years. He first oversaw the UPWP as a program manager, and then also now more recently the freight program. He's leaving us to take on a new role with the MPTA. So I just wanted to highlight that, you know, Sandy's been involved in quite a bit of work at the agency, even beyond the programs that, you know, he's been associated with. And he's been quite a key contributor, including on working groups and discrete studies and supporting the other core document development for the MPO. And I also wanted to share that I've really enjoyed Sandy's thoughtfulness about both his work, but also the agency itself as we've been evolving over the last several years. And wanted to give him a chance, I hope, to say a few words, since this is Sandy's last policy board meeting before his last day, which is scheduled for Friday, December 30th. So if it's okay, Mr. Chair, I'd like to give him an opportunity to say a few things.
Of course, Sandy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Tegan, for the kind words. I have to say this is kind of an emotional moment for me because I really am sad to be saying goodbye to what has really been an excellent professional experience. I certainly am not saying goodbye after as long a tenure as some of my other colleagues who we've said goodbye to in the last year or two who have been here for 20 to 30 years, which is really, you know, amazing achievements by those folks. But I do feel like in these past 6 years, I've gotten to know many of you on the board pretty well, especially those who I've had the pleasure of supporting on the UPWP committee. And I've always appreciated the extent to which members of this board show curiosity about the work and are dedicated to it, despite also universally being extremely busy with your day jobs. Your thoughtful comments and your questions have really taught me a lot and enhanced the quality of my work and my colleagues' work. And while I'll have other chances to say goodbye to my CTPS colleagues as well, I do want to take this opportunity to thank Tegan and Jonathan and Annette and others in CTPS management and my colleagues in the MPO activities group and elsewhere for kind of helping me grow as a planner and in my work, and I'll miss you all greatly. But I'm not going very far. In fact, As Tegan mentioned, I'm going to work for another member of this board, Lori Gilmore, in strategic planning at the MBTA. So my title there will be Deputy Director of Regional Transit Planning. And I'll be seeing, I believe, many, if not all of you professionally in that new context as well. So again, thank you, Tegan, for the opportunity to speak. Thank you, everybody, for really an excellent experience over the last 6 years. And as we say in Hebrew, which is the only non-English language I speak, it's not goodbye, it's Lahitro, it's see you later.
Thank you, Sandy. Good luck. We'll miss you.
Thank you.
Tegan?
Thanks. We will also miss you as well, Sandy, all of us as staff, but look forward to seeing you in your new role. All right, the next item is I wanted to just highlight for the board that we have received the draft report from our federal certification review, which is the process that I've talked about a few times here that happens every 4 years to recertify the MPO based on how we've been performing and the work we've done over the prior 4 years. So at this point, we've had an opportunity to review the narrative and recommendations, and we'll be providing some comments. And then when we have a final version from our federal partners, which we expect to be towards the end of this calendar year, we'll be able to come back to the board to talk more about the recommendations and corrective actions in the report. So I'll look forward to that conversation with you all. Next, as a reminder, I'm adding in some regular long-range transportation plan updates in my executive director reports. So this one is called Destination 2050, and we expect to adopt it in this coming calendar year, 2023. So during today's meeting, we have an agenda item about this. Actually, Michelle Scott will be discussing our progress on creating the planning framework, which is what is the vision, goals, and objectives for transportation in the region, which is the grounding framework for the entire long-range plan. And then following the MPO meeting, we will have a workshop at 12:30 over Zoom to talk further about the ideas around this planning framework in a guided discussion. So the details to access that next meeting are on the December 15th page of the MPO meeting calendar. Please join us. And then, as I've also mentioned at previous meeting, we have ongoing research that we're carrying out now on possible updates to the investment programs that the MPO adopts. Those are guidelines on how much of the MPO target funds are allocated to different kinds of projects. And so we'll look forward to being able to discuss these ideas that we have for you in the beginning of the next calendar year. Next slide, please. So I have a few engagement highlights around past and upcoming meetings. In terms of these sub-regional meetings that I've been updating you on, we've now met with 7 of the 8 MAPC sub-regional groups to discuss the planning process and sub-regional transportation priorities relative to the long-range plan. We met most recently with Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, or SWAP, on the 6th, and the North Suburban Planning Council on the 13th. And then the last meeting we'll have will be with Metro West Regional Collaborative, and the date is still to be determined. Another activity we recently carried out to talk about the long-range plan was meeting with the 495 Metro West Partnership in late November. So then upcoming, we will also be hosting the quarterly Intercore Committee Transportation Group meeting on January 11th at 9 a.m. And this is going to be a conversation that's going to include updates and just sort of generally bringing together, as before, the Intercore transportation planners discuss transportation issues in that subregion. So we'll have a detailed agenda on that posted shortly. If you have questions about those events, these events on this slide, Stella Jordan, our Public Engagement Program Manager, can give you more information. She's at sjordan@ctps.org. And then the next slide, please. So an important deadline is coming up. We have the deadline for the TIP project applications for funding in the upcoming TIP, which is the 24 to 28 Transportation Improvement Program. That deadline is coming up on December 23rd. So the link to the applications page is going to be put in the chat if it hasn't already. And we have been meeting as staff with municipalities across the region to discuss their local initiatives and help answer questions and support them in considering the application process. And we will continue those, and please don't hesitate to reach out to staff if you have questions about that application process. And then finally, we have 2 live surveys to highlight. First, a survey around, again, the long-range plan, Destination 2050. Collecting feedback to help shape the plan. And the second is for collecting ideas for what we call the discrete studies in the upcoming UPWP. And just as a reminder for those who are unfamiliar, that's the document that lays out our work for the year. And a subset of that funding is allocated towards discrete study ideas that we gain from methods like this survey. So please help us gather this input. Please share it with your networks. Please fill them out and contact Megan O'Connor, our communications coordinator at moconnor@ctps.org if you would like any assistance in crafting any kind of copy for sharing those surveys, social media or otherwise. With that, turning it over to today's agenda. Next slide, please. You'll have an action to vote to release for a 21-day comment period, the second amendment to the 23 to 27 tip. That will include some cost changes, some cost increases to highway projects, and a shifting of funds and a new project for RTAs. And then, as I also mentioned, we'll have an update on the draft Destination 2050 planning framework. And then we'll have 2 presentations on studies that staff have completed. Next slide, please. As a reminder, the next MPO meeting is scheduled for January 5th. We will likely have a number of scopes to talk about, and then also travel time, reliability, performance targets. And that, Mr. Chair, is it. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Tegan. Are there questions for Tegan? Seeing and hearing none. Next item on the agenda is public comments. Is there any member of the public who would like to make a comment at this time? Seeing and hearing none. If you want to comment during the meeting, please raise your hand and we will call on you. Committee's chairs reports. Brian Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to note that the ANF committee did meet just before this one to continue our work on the operations plan. Today, we discussed the concept of how we can engage with the tip and project readiness, how to make that process a little more clear for everyone. We talked about how resolutions may or may not be undertaken, and we talked sort of about work products, or actually we didn't talk about that. We were supposed to, but we didn't. Our next meeting is the 5th of January in 2023 at 9 a.m. And of course, all are invited. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions for Brian? Seeing none. Any other committee chairs reports at this time? Next up, Regional Transportation Advisory Council report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yesterday, we met with Julie Dombrowski, Seth Ashanti, and Rebecca Morgan to talk about MPO corridor studies and multimodal mobility infrastructure program of the MPO. And it was good because we got to look back at the presentation or study that had been presented back in February 2021. And it was a very positive experience to see the extent to which the MPO is really focusing on resilience and also some of the possibilities for future studies. And we also had a really good preliminary discussion about MPO public education strategies and methods. Hopefully someone can drop into the chat the PDF that was associated with that item in yesterday's agenda, because we are looking at some of the things that other MPOs are doing with respect to outreach, to communities, to members of the community, for education, and also we see it as potential to not only educate people in the region, but also develop a pipeline for people who can work with MPO and potentially be members of the advisory council and the board. So thank you very much. Looking forward to more interaction on that topic, not only with my colleagues on the advisory board, but also members of this board, because whereas we are your advisory council, we also welcome your advice. And on this one, I think it'll be particularly helpful. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynn. Any questions for Lynn? Seeing none. Next item is the approval of the minutes of October 20th. Can I get a motion and a second from a member to approve the minutes? And please state your name for the record when making the motion. Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, I'll make a motion to approve the October 20th meeting minutes.
Brian Kane.
Brian Kane, MET Advisory Board, second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Are there any comments, changes, questions, or suggestions? Seeing none. Oh, Laura Gilmore.
I just had one quick comment on the minutes. I see that I am noted in them as making some comments during this meeting, but I am not included in the list of attendees.
Thank you, Laura. Can somebody please correct that and make sure Laura is listed in the list of attendees?
We will do that. Yes, we will.
Thank you.
With that change, Jonathan, please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
Marie Rose,
Yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Laura Gilmore,
Yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Brian Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Bill Conroy,
Bill Conroy, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Todd Corain,
Todd Corain, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Benton, yes.
Austin Saganowitz,
Austin Saganowitz, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
Peter Pelletier,
Peter Pelletier abstain.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of November 3rd, 2022. Can I get a motion in a second to approve the minutes, and please state your name for the record? Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, I'll make a motion to approve the November 3rd meeting minutes.
Brian King.
I surprisingly will second that motion.
Motion has been made and seconded. Are there any comments, changes, questions, or suggestions? Seeing none, Jonathan, please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
Marie Rose,
Yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Laura Gilmore,
Yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Brian Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Bill Conroy,
Bill Conroy, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Todd Corain,
Todd Corain, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Benton, yes.
Austin Saganowitz,
Austin Saganowitz, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
Peter Pelletier,
Peter Pelletier abstain.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is tip amendment 2. Brian, you have your hand up because you want to speak?
Yeah, can I go out of order for a quick second, Mr. Chair? I just want to note that this is Todd Corain's last meeting as well from the town of Brookline. He is departing after 17 years. I certainly will. He's departing after 17 years of service to the town, many years on this organization, and he's going to Worcester. So Worcester's gain is this region's loss.
Wow, congratulations, Todd. We'll miss you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Next item on the agenda is the tip amendment number 2. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. I'm Ethan Lapointe, Transportation Improvement Program Manager for Boston Region MPO. The purpose of this presentation will be to cover the content of Amendment 2 to the Transportation Improvement Program. If we go on to the next slide, please. To give a brief overview of what is included in Amendment 2, this is the second amendment and revision to the federal fiscal year 2023 to 27 TIP, being the current document. This follows Amendment 1, which was approved by the MPO board on November 17th, last month. For the federal fiscal year 2023 program, which is the only year we're making changes to with this amendment, Amendment 2 proposes 4 project cost adjustments, which are the result of revised engineers' cost estimates, the inclusion of an earmark for design of the Assabet River Rail Trail in Stowe. I may have mispronounced that, but we also have some changes to RTA projects for Cape Ann and the Metro West region, including some updated project names just to change some acronyms to full spell outs. If we go on to the next slide, please, we can go into a little bit more detail for changes by project. And then one more, please. So starting off with projects that are being funded by statewide highway funds, we have the Lexington Bridge replacement, which is bridge number L10010, which is Route 2A Merritt Road over I-95 Route 128, again in Lexington. This is a cost increase of $6,822,000 that is being financed through the statewide highway program with bridge formula funds. Again, this is not regional target funded. And again, the rationale for this is that the project is increasing based on the submission of 100% designs. Advertisement for this project is scheduled for January 21st, 2023. The next project is currently partially funded by regional target funds. However, the amount of funding that is increasing for the Dedham pedestrian improvements to Bussey Street and superstructure replacement of D0510 over Mother Brook is coming from statewide highway funding for bridge formula. This increases in the amount of $1,981,000. So again, this will not impact regional target funding, even though this is an MPO prioritized project, the remainder of the funding of which is regional target. If we move on to the next slide, we can cover two more in the statewide highway program. This includes a resurfacing project for Route 114 in Danvers and Middleton. The cost increase here is being financed through the National Highway Performance Program funding with an increase of $1,661,763. Again, this is the result of final design submissions with advertised planned for February 18th, 2023. The next project is the Medford, Reading, Somerville, Stoneham, Winchester, Woburn interstate pavement preservation job for I-93, which also includes some bridge preservation activities. This project is being funded with National Highway Performance Program money and bridge formula funding. The budget is increasing by $26,483,000. And the project cost is increasing in part because of the submission of final designs, and our understanding is that it also incorporates some of the additional bridge work improvements. Moving on to the next slide and go towards that earmark I mentioned previously regarding Stowe. This line item incorporates a $750,000 earmark from the 2022 Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development earmarks package for the House from Representative Tran's district. This is for the Assabet River Rail Trail extension, just for engineering and design for this project. The construction of this project will be funded by a separate line item that is not currently in the TIP or the STIP at this time. And this project is, again, will be programmed in federal fiscal year 2023. Next slide, please. This will take us into some of the changes we have for the RTAs in the region. The first one is for the Metro West Regional Transit Authority. This is the result of what is known as the annual Boston Urbanized Area Split Letter. This split letter outlines an annual reapportionment of funds between different transit agencies within the Boston Urbanized Area. And as a result of this letter, Metro West is allocating additional funding for Section 5307 funding, which is generally more operating funds, rolling stock and capital, with some of their state contract authority funding to increase their operating budget for non-fixed route and paratransit services in the amount of $643,494. If we go on to the next slide, going a little bit more into detail on a capital project. This is a new project for the Cape Ann Transportation Authority that is being funded again with those Section 5307 funds and Regional Transit Authority capital funding. This is for the replacement of 2 replica trolleys in the amount of $1,280,000. For reference, a replica trolley is effectively a rubber-tired bus that is just being mocked up to resemble a historic trolley, hence the name. These 2 trolleys reached the end of their useful service lives in 2011 and 2013, and this line item should provide for their full replacement. If we go on to the next slide, I believe that is it for all of the project line item changes we have in this program. Before we open the floor to questions, staff are requesting that the board votes to move forward with Amendment 2 to open this up to public comment. As an amendment, public comment will commence today, December 15th, and conclude January 19th, or will conclude after a 21-day period on January 6th, and be voted for endorsement on January 19th, 2023.
Thank you, Ethan. Are there any questions for Ethan or for anyone else? Tom Bent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ethan, on 610726, I was wondering if you could give us a little bit more information on that, because the added cost is actually, over double, is more than the original 21 million. So I was just trying to, I saw in the description, it's talking about bundling of bridge preservation work along the corridor. What was more work added from what the original cost estimate was?
Thanks, Tom. If we go back a couple slides to that slide there, Logan, just to put it on screen, we have some folks from MassDOT here today that can provide a little bit more detail on the scope of work for that project. So if any of them would like to weigh in on this, because they're a little bit more engineering oriented than myself.
Marie Rose. Marie, you can unmute yourself. I think. There you
Oh,
go.
sorry, I was muted. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Did you particularly have a question on the Danvers Middleton or the Medford, Reading, Somerville, Stoneham, Winchester, Woburn, or both?
This was on the Medford, Reading, Somerville, Stoneham, Winchester, Woburn, on that one.
Okay, it's because as the explanation, it's mostly bridge preservation items that got added to the scope of that.
No, but I'm assuming there was an awful lot added because the original amount was 21 million. You added 26, so the total now is over 48 million. So I'm just trying to understand what the scope, what the scope changes,
Yeah, I would have to check with the district office because I don't know off the top of my head. But I can definitely check on the reasons for those increases, for that increase.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Seeing none, can I get a motion in a second to release this for a 21-day public review process? And please state your name for the record when making a motion or the second. Eric Barassa.
I'll make a motion to put this out for a public comment period.
Thank you. Is there a second? Tom Bennett.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Motion having been made and seconded. Jonathan, please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
Marie Rose,
Marie Rose, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Laura Gilmore,
Laura Gilmore, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Amira Patterson is taking over for the advisory board. Amira Patterson,
Amira Patterson, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Bill Conroy,
Bill Conroy, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Todd Corain,
Todd Corain, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Austin Saganowitz,
Austin Saganowitz, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
Peter Pelletier,
Peter Pelletier, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries unanimous, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Next item on the agenda is progress on draft destination 2050 planning framework. Michelle Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Michelle Scott. I'm the Long Range Transportation Plan Manager for the Boston Region MPO staff, and I'm here to give an update on the work staff has been doing to create a planning framework for Destination 2050. Next slide, please. So some high points for today's presentation. We've been doing some work on this draft planning framework over the last couple months, and we'd like to check in on the progress we're making and to learn more about whether we should be building on some of the elements of our draft or changing course. So there are a number of opportunities to provide feedback. As Tegan mentioned during her executive director's report, we're going to be having a MPO member workshop to go through the draft in more detail following this meeting starting at 12:30. Of course, we are happy to take some high-level comments during today's meeting as well. We'll also be providing a survey form with some of the same questions about the draft that you can provide feedback that way. And of course, if there's other forms of communication, email, Zoom meetings, giving me a call to talk about your feedback, we definitely welcome that as well. Next slide, please. So the elements of my presentation today, I'll start by covering what the planning framework, and we've often called this our vision, goals, and objectives, what the role of that framework is in the MPO's process, talk about some of the inputs and types of information that went into our first draft and the approach that we use to kind of set up that draft. I'll go over the features of the planning framework and highlight some of the areas where we're particularly interested in collecting feedback, although feedback of any kind is definitely welcome, and then talk about our next steps for refining this framework further. Next slide, please. Before I do that, I wanted to just give a brief overview of the range of things that we're working on with the LRTP and the types of information and decisions and questions we'll be bringing to you over the next couple of months. So this graphic highlights kind of 6 areas that we'll be working on to create Destination 2050 that we have been working on and will continue to work on through summer of 2023. They include identifying needs, creating this planning framework, identifying strategies for investment, including work on the investment programs and identifying candidate projects. Later in the spring, we'll be talking more about how to allocate the MPO's funds to these different investment areas and strategies. We'll be developing the Destination 2050 document that captures those decisions. And of course, throughout the process, we'll be engaging stakeholders and the public and our partners in this process. Next slide, please. Of course, today our focus is on the planning framework. Next slide, please. So just to give a high-level picture of this framework, what goes into it and what it does, this diagram highlights those elements. On the left side, those 4 arrows highlight different sources of input that go into work to shape this framework, typically made up of a vision, series of goals, and objectives nested within those goals. Those sources of input include MPO member feedback, things that we hear from our planning partners and members of the public and stakeholder groups, information that we learn through partner plans and policies, those plans being developed at the federal, Commonwealth, or regional level, as well as ideas coming from MPO staff based on their transportation planning expertise. All of this kind of feeds into the development of our vision, goals, and objectives, and they go on to shape a number of different aspects of the MPO process. They guide the way we set up our investment programs through the LRTP, which sends signals to project proponents about the types of projects we'd like to fund and what we hope to accomplish by funding them. They are the basis for our TIP project and our UPWP study selection criteria. And of course, this framework is an important tool for communicating the MPO's values to our partners and stakeholders. Next slide, please. So I'm going to walk through a couple of these different input sources. First, you may recall that over the summer and into the fall, we held workshops with you, the MPO members, as well as members of the Regional Transportation Advisory Council to collect input on how we might shape this framework. We got a lot of different kinds of input, all of it extremely helpful to us. I just use this slide to call out a couple of high-level themes. First, we heard that our existing planning framework structure with the vision, goals, and objectives generally works for people. There's lots of different ways to create these frameworks and different elements we can bring into them, but we're happy to know that the approach we've been using over the past couple plans still generally works for people. In terms of priorities, we heard a lot about safety, resiliency, equity, and the importance of reducing carbon, greenhouse gases in our transportation system. People really emphasize the importance of finding ways to measure and evaluate the different areas of the framework so that we can determine whether the investments that the MPO makes and the plans that we develop are successful. In terms of talking more specifically about greenhouse gases, we acknowledge there are a lot of different ways to help reduce those produced by the transportation system, but we got a number of comments kind of emphasizing the role of encouraging mode shift and reducing vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, over kind of the promotion of electric vehicles. And folks also emphasize the importance of making sure that this framework is integrated with other plans and goals that are being developed in the region and the Commonwealth. Next slide, please. So as we've highlighted at a couple points in the MPO meeting today, we're also doing a lot of public engagement that includes engagement on the LRTP and some of these questions around visioning in the planning framework. Of course, we've been talking to the MPO, the MAPC subregions. We've had a couple of other events, such as coming to meetings like those held by the 495 Metro West Partnership and hosting a coffee chat with our transit working group. We also have the survey that's currently out and collecting feedback. And this word cloud highlights some of the kinds of responses that we've gotten from people who have taken the survey about characteristics of their ideal transportation system. You can see some of the larger words that reflect, more frequent responses, themes around reliability, safety, frequent things like transit, having an interconnected system that's affordable, multimodal, and carbon neutral. Next slide, please. Our survey is also collecting feedback about different kinds of priorities. What this matrix does, in the top row, you can see different priority areas, ranging from things like roadway safety, transit access and reliability, infrastructure resiliency. The first column highlights a series of ranks. We asked people to rank these different topic areas 1 through 9 in terms of importance to them. The shading over the numbers kind of highlights where we saw a lot of people give that priority area a specific rank. So you can see there are a couple of areas where a lot of folks rank things towards the top. Things like transit access and reliability, walking and biking safety are really important to people. Other areas, even like greenhouse gases, transit safety, you can kind of see a mix with kind of shading throughout the column that highlights that people rank these things in a number of different ways. Next slide, please. So again, coming back to the element of partner plans and policies, this is also, something we were attentive to when putting this framework together. Over the summer, we undertook an extensive plan and policy and study review process, largely to support our needs assessment and other activities. This shows the logos of a couple of different organizations whose plans we looked at. Definitely not an exhaustive list, but we definitely referred to MAPC's recently released Metro Common 2050 plan, the Commonwealth's decarbonization plan, the updates happening with the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, as well as a number of federal initiatives, including provisions under the recently adopted bipartisan infrastructure law, the National Roadway Safety Strategy, which was released earlier this year, and the Justice 40 initiative, which focuses on addressing environmental justice and directing resources to those communities at the federal level. Next slide, please. Kind of that fourth input area I mentioned were staff ideas for updating the framework. This slide highlights a couple of different areas and themes that we took from staff's work, bringing it into this planning framework. First was our experience updating the TIP criteria a couple years ago. And we'll talk about this more when we talk about the role of equity in this draft planning framework. A second area is an increased emphasis on destination access. Last month, Betsy Harvey shared her study regarding baseline metrics for understanding transportation equity. Many of them focused on access to destinations. And of course, as she illustrated during that presentation, we have new tools to help us understand and measure those destination access characteristics better. So really bringing this more into our framework. And finally, drawing on, recent research for our needs assessment and throughout our UPWP studies, really emphasizing resiliency and safety challenges that the region is currently facing and will be facing in the years ahead. Next slide, please. So those are all of the ingredients. We tried to set a number of guiding principles to kind of guide the work that we've been doing on the draft thus far. You may remember us talking about this during the MPO member workshop over the summer. So here are kind of some general principles we were thinking about as we were working. Does this framework clearly communicate MPO values? Can we measure or monitor some of the different elements that we're including in this framework? Is it going to help MPO member decision-making? How well connected and integrated are the elements of this framework with one another? How do we balance our aspirations for the region with the realities that we're facing on the ground in terms of improving transportation and related outcomes? And also, how can we design these elements so that they're broad enough to allow us flexibility for adapting our planning process between LRTP development cycles? Next slide, please. So again, here's a reminder of the overall structure, again, maintaining the approach we've used in previous planning processes. We have a vision that articulates our hopes for the transportation system in the region overall. We pull out specific aspects of transportation and really emphasize those in our different goal areas. Each goal houses a number of objectives that really reflect specific actions to improve transportation. These can be focused on achieving different outcomes or even where the MPO is putting its attention. And our performance-based planning and programming process, gives us the opportunity to monitor and evaluate these different areas. Before I go into some features of the framework, I just want to highlight that we have a resource posted on the MPO meeting calendar today. This is a cover memo that articulates a lot of the material I just went over in this presentation, a draft of the framework, and also the framework we have in our current plan, Destination 2040. So you can kind of look at them side by side and see how they compare. Next slide, please. So I'll start just by recapping our draft vision statement. So far, we've come up with this one, which is that the Boston Region MPO envisions an equitable, pollution-free, and modern regional transportation system that enables people to safely and reliably reach where they need and want to go. This system supports an inclusive Boston region that is healthy, resilient, and economically vibrant. Next slide, please. So this diagram illustrates how we've approached setting up the goal areas. And you can see in this diagram kind of equity in the center. And what we've tried to do in this case is not only continue to have a standalone equity goal as we've had in recent LRTPs, but also start to bring equity elements more fully into the other goal areas. And this kind of mirrors the process that we used for updating our TIP evaluation criteria a couple years ago, where you'll see kind of that equity overlay and multipliers for the criteria in the specific goal areas. We've also done some kind of reorganization of themes, and of course, adding in new themes that have kind of restructured the way we've set up our goals compared to Destination 2040, our current plan. So in addition to this standalone equity goal, we have goals for access and connectivity, safety, clean air and healthy communities, resiliency, and mobility and reliability. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to walk through the 6 goal areas, give you some high points. Not going to go into a lot of detail, but hopefully give you enough information to have a picture of how we've approached things. So in our equity goal, we've emphasized the importance of supporting an inclusive planning process and redressing and addressing past burdens and disparities. A couple of things that this goal does, it does define disadvantaged communities, and you'll see that phrase kind of carry through objectives in the other goal areas. Somewhat of a new strategy here, we've included goals or an objective specifically about maintaining an inclusive engagement process to inform MPO decision-making and keep people involved. And this is something, again, that we're strengthening our monitoring efforts around, and you'll hear more about our recent equity engagement accomplishments and the types of interactions we've had early next calendar year from our communications and engagement team. This goal also houses, emphasis on reducing the harmful impacts of transportation and improving transportation outcomes for disadvantaged communities in the region. Next slide, please. We've continued to have a safety goal as we have in Destination 2040. You'll notice though in the framing of this goal, this time in the statement, we've really taken a more Vision Zero orientation to it. This is kind of, focusing on achieving zero transportation related fatalities and serious injuries. This is mirroring framing that we're seeing both at the national level in the National Roadway Safety Strategy, as well as in the Commonwealth Strategic Highway Safety Plan, which that maintains that long-term goal of zero fatalities and serious injuries. In terms of objectives, we focus on reducing negative safety outcomes and events across all modes. And here's the first place you'll start to see that equity integration throughout the goal areas, eliminating disparities in safety outcomes for disadvantaged communities, areas that are already overburdened by negative safety outcomes, and those experienced by vulnerable roadway users, such as bicyclists and pedestrians. Next slide, please. Our next goal is mobility and reliability. One thing you'll notice if you're to look at our existing framework and this draft framework side by side is we've taken what has been the capacity management mobility goal in Destination 2040 and kind of spread those themes out across other goal areas in this new draft framework. We've also brought in elements from other pre-existing goal areas there as well. So this goal is focused on providing excellent mobility and for people and freight. It emphasizes improving reliability for our roadway and transit systems and emphasizing non-SOV solutions for reducing travel delay. We've taken themes around state of good repair and modernization that have existed in other goal areas and past planning frameworks and incorporated them here because improvements in these areas, better state of good repair for our infrastructure and modernizing things helps people move faster and more effectively. Again, this is an area where we're also looking to address disparities in reliability, particularly for transit for disadvantaged communities. Next slide, please. Goal number 4 is access and connectivity. So this is where we're really bringing in those themes around destination access that I referenced earlier. This is focused on providing options and improving access to key destinations that support people's quality of life. Again, throughout the objectives in this goal, we've really tried to emphasize non-single occupancy vehicle options for getting around, address the importance of addressing travel barriers and network gaps, and these can exist in all aspects of the transportation system, from bike networks to the transit network and integration between the different services that provide transit in the region. And again, the importance of emphasizing frequent, high quality options and improving access to destinations for disadvantaged communities. By pursuing this objective, we hope to see improved performance on the types of metrics that Betsy was discussing back in November. Next slide, please. Goal number 5 is resiliency. And again, we were really trying to give this more of a prominent place in our planning framework. We've definitely referenced it. You'll see it referenced in Destination 2040, but really wanted to make it stand out as we're seeing increased effects from climate change and extreme weather. So again, this goal is focused on supporting response and adaptation to climate change and changing conditions. It highlights the kinds of hazards we're experiencing now and will continue to experience in the future, ranging from sea level rise, extreme weather, increased heat and precipitation. Objectives in this area, focused on investments both for long-term resiliency and for improving emergency response and evacuation. And also making sure that we're making these investments in disadvantaged and environmentally burdened communities, many of which are going to be on the front line of communities that are going to experience these climate impacts. Next slide, please. Goal number 6 is clean air and healthy communities. This is where we focus on the mitigation portion of climate change as opposed to adaptation under the resiliency goal. The aim here is to provide transportation that's free of greenhouse gases and other air pollutants, and to support sustainable environments and good health. Again, really trying to bring out the public health element through this goal area. We have in this draft some more explicit objectives around encouraging mode shift and reducing VMT that we're bringing more to the fore than we may have had in previous planning frameworks. Definitely interested in hearing your feedback about that. Again, emphasis on reducing greenhouse gases and other air pollutants, such as carbon monoxide, ozone, the types of things that we track through our air quality and CMAQ processes. Again, we want to reduce those environmental burdens that disadvantaged communities are experiencing, and we want to make sure that we're supporting transportation that reduces its impact on the environment. Next slide, please. So we have a lot of areas that we're interested in hearing feedback about. Of course, any feedback of any kind is welcome. But one of the things that we'll be doing at the workshop is kind of walking through these different areas and getting your impressions. These range from how you feel about the way we've integrated equity into the other goal areas, how we've reorganized themes into these new sets of goals, our approach to Vision Zero and our safety goal, what's missing, how we should convey our priorities. Again, a lot of items on this list. And of course, we're looking forward to hearing feedback even beyond what's here. Next slide, please. So just to recap, opportunities to provide feedback, we'll have a little time at this meeting for some high-level comments if you want to make them, following the end of the presentation. But again, we're going to be going into these elements in a lot of detail at the workshop at 12:30. We also will be providing a feedback tool in writing if you can't make the workshop or would rather provide feedback that way. And again, if there are other ways you'd like to communicate your feedback, we're definitely open to those as well. The survey that I've referenced and that Tegan referenced in her executive report will continue to be available. And as more responses come in, we're going to be integrating that into the work that we're doing. And we hope to share an updated version of the framework with you in early 2023. Next slide, please. So just some additional details about the survey. This is something that we use both for this planning framework update as well as work on the investment programs and conversations we can have about priorities early next calendar year. The link is there. We can also provide that in the chat. It's also available at our plan website, which is bostonmpo.org/destination2050. We'll be collecting responses through this survey through January 13th. We do really hope you'll share this survey with your networks and your constituents. As Tegan mentioned, if you'd like email or social media copy to do that, we definitely can provide that. I believe that's the close of my presentation, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Michelle. Comments, questions from the members? So Michelle, how many survey responses have you gotten so far? Can you put that slide up, the slide that had the color coding of survey responses?
Yeah, I think that slide maybe 8 or 9.
Yeah, it's pretty far back.
Yeah, so that's, we've had the survey open since about around Thanksgiving, I think the beginning of that week. We did kind of a check-in to make some of these charts. These reflect around 160 survey responses now. I think we're up to kind of the high 200s. And of course, we're hoping to continue to get more as we go, through the rest of December and early next calendar year.
And so I'm not sure I'm reading this. Roughly half of the people said roadway reliability was their least important issue. Is that true?
Yep, that's something that they've kind of ranked to the bottom of 1 to 9. Yes. And
a third of them said roadway safety is not important to them either. Or maybe not a third, a fifth of them. 33 out of however many there were said, yeah, I don't care about roadway safety.
Yeah, it may be kind of a function of, we provide when in the survey, and if you kind of look through it, you'll see it. We provide some contextual comments under these, priority areas of course, people may be focusing more on the walking and biking part versus the general, crash part, but yeah, that's kind of how people have responded. And of course, these aren't the only questions in the survey. We get a lot of additional context from some open response questions to gauge what's important to folks. So we're drawing on those resources as well as we're framing out this planning framework.
Yeah, I mean, the results are the results. They just, seems like, yeah, I'll just leave it there. Lynn?
Well, Mr. Chair, I guess I'm not going to let you leave it there because my feelings are, it's like, it's a ranking. I might have ranked it last, any of those last, but they're still important. So I think maybe to get at how people really feel, maybe have to ask two questions or a multi-dimensional question where it's like, okay, you ranked it, but still, how do you feel? How important is it to you? So you characterize it as, they don't care. And it's like, no, we care about these things. It's just that if you're going to ask me to rank it in this list of important topics, that's just where I put it. So that's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
You're welcome. Others? All right, I hope people participate at the workshop. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is safety and operations intersection studies in Hull and Randolph. Julie Dombrowski.
Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. I'm Julie. I am a transportation planner in the traffic analysis and design group here at CTPS. And today I'm going to share with you two projects, one in the town of Hull and the other in the town of Randolph. And these are studies that were part of our safety and operations at selected intersections program, which is funded under the UPWP. And these studies are used to analyze existing conditions and assess potential improvement concepts that can be further analyzed and assessed in future project development. Next slide, please. So the first study I will be sharing with you all is in the town of Hull. It is the intersection of George Washington Boulevard and Rockland Circle. George Washington Boulevard is one of three main routes in and out of the town. And it is an area that is vulnerable to coastal flooding and impacted by sea level rise. Next slide, please. So George Washington Boulevard runs north-south, and Rockland Circle is east-west residential street that connects to Nantasket Avenue. And this intersection was identified by the town because of its lack of adequate pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure connections to other areas of the town. Next slide, please. So we collected crash and traffic volume data and analyzed it during this study process. And we also used that data to analyze the existing conditions and project for future conditions, and included some considerations for rising sea levels in our analysis. So we came up with the following significant improvements. There were other improvements assessed, but these were the largest ones. Some short-term improvements included restriping the roadway and signal retiming. And some long-term improvements include crosswalk installation, new sidewalks, multi-use path installation, and a road diet on George Washington Boulevard is also proposed in a few of the assessed treatments. Next slide, please. The first alternative that was assessed keeps the geometry of the existing intersection basically similar to what it is. And it adds a crossing along the northern leg of George Washington Boulevard and a new sidewalk along the northern edge of Rockland Circle that will connect to existing sidewalks that go up to Nantasket Avenue and to the beach there. And the next slide, please. In our second alternative, we had two options, and they're both unsignalized because the intersection in its current form does not meet the requirements for a traffic signal. So the first option that we analyzed was the stop controlled design, which includes the road diet that I mentioned earlier, as well as, again, crosswalk on the northern leg of George Washington Boulevard, a new sidewalk, and because of the road diet, we proposed a multi-use path that runs along George Washington Boulevard to replace the existing sidewalk. Next slide. And then the second option in this alternative was for a roundabout. The improvements are similar to the first. Again, reduction in the number of lanes, installing a new sidewalk, crosswalk, and a multi-use path. Next slide. The second study I'll be sharing is in Randolph, and it is the intersection known as Crawford Square, and also the intersection of Memorial Parkway at North Main Street. Next slide. So the study area does contain two intersections. Typically, these projects are only focused on one, but because of the proximity of these intersections, it was necessary to study them together, just due to traffic patterns in the area. So Crawford Square is that large four-leg intersection, which is where Route 139 and Route 28 meet. And then the intersection just north of that is Memorial Parkway and North Main Street. And the Crawford Square intersection is on the HSIP crash list. So safety was a large factor into why this study area was selected. Next slide. So in addition to collecting data, we also conducted a survey, and we received 426 responses to this survey between July 6th and July 29th. So relatively significant response rate for the time that the survey was open. And some of the major takeaways from the survey were that most of the respondents are driving through the corridor and driving through the study area, and most of them are going shopping. There's a shopping plaza just north of the study area with a grocery store and some other businesses. In addition to people who drive, there were a good number of folks who said that they walk in the study area. And then overall, the most important concerns that were noted by respondents were high traffic volumes and the high number of crashes that occurred in the study area, some safety concerns for people who walk and bike. Some people had issues with accessing some side streets or driveways to businesses. And then people also noted the long wait time at the signals. Next slide, please. So after analyzing the data we collected crash data, volume data, and collecting all of the survey responses, we came up with these improvements. So in the short term, we recommend that the signal system is upgraded and that the signals are retimed and the signals at each intersection are coordinated. Right now, they are not coordinated, which is contributing to a lot of the delay and queuing issues. And then in the long term, we are proposing some geometric changes to Turner Lane, which we'll see in the next slide. Turner Lane kind of dumps out onto North Main Street, and also some changes to Memorial Parkway, specifically concerns with pedestrian visibility on Memorial Parkway. Next slide, please. So these are two options for Turner Lane, which, as I said before, it kind of runs into North Main Street, and there were a good number of crashes, specifically angle crashes here, with people either turning out of Turner Lane onto North Main Street or folks trying to take a left onto Turner Lane from North Main Street. So we proposed closing off access to Turner Lane from North Main Street, or creating a exit one-way, right turn only egress, which would reduce kind of the two-way traffic there and would remove the ability to make a left turn onto Turner Lane from North Main Street. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, safety of pedestrians was a concern here on Memorial Parkway. A lot of responses from the survey noted that, and then folks in the town also brought that up. The high school is just off of the left side of this image here. So there are a lot of students who are walking at in the morning and at school release in the afternoon. So we proposed adding some warning signs and then also a rectangular rapid flashing beacon to improve the visibility of folks who are crossing, and also to slow down vehicles, especially folks who are going west on a Memorial Parkway. There are some speed issues there. Next slide. So we encouraged the towns to implement the low-cost short-term improvements first, and then coordinate with stakeholders to find a path to prioritizing long-term improvements. And yeah, that's about it. I'm open to questions and comments, and thanks for listening.
Thank you, Julie. Questions for Julie? Julie, I have one. Do you price your recommendations like at a planning level analysis price? Like how much would a roundabout cost there?
Oh, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. We didn't do any cost benefit analysis for either of these projects on the long-term improvements, so I cannot answer that, David.
No worries. Jen Constable.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie, for your work on this. I just have a couple of quick questions. Both were intersection improvement studies. Was there a survey that was also conducted on the Hull intersection?
There was
survey?
not. We did not conduct a survey on the whole intersection.
And I'm just, is there a reason why it would be done one and not another?
No, there isn't a reason. The Randolph intersection was incredibly, the crash rate there is relatively high, and it's a higher trafficked area. So I just wanted some opinions of folks who drive through that intersection a lot. Yeah.
Okay, I guess I would just note one area of concern then with that. So you noted that certainly for the town, bike and pedestrian access improvements were necessary, but safety for that particular intersection was the primary reason and request for the study. And I know it came out in discussions around the study in terms of crash rates and traffic study, that the study was conducted up, I forget the starting period, but ended in April. And for this particular community, their numbers increase, there's a population of 10,000, but increase at least sixfold in those summer months, which is the high season. That intersection, which also wasn't noted, is the gateway to the community, a major commercial district, as well as Nantasket Reservation. And so that volume difference and that location is a significant concern, because that's where we see the largest safety concerns and need for that improved pedestrian and bike access.
Yeah, I can answer. I will say yeah, we collected the volumes for the Hull intersection in the spring, and I know that the summer is when it's a much higher trafficked area. And so just, it happened to be with the timing of this project, that's when they were collected. But going forward, for future analysis, we would definitely recommend that volumes are collected in the summer, because it would make an impact on some of the results of the study, but also, you know, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'll just make one last comment. It just for the community, then that just, I guess, questions to some degree the integrity of the study as we try and move forward with, you know, the study results and implementing some of the recommendations.
Well, I definitely think the town should go ahead and implement the short-term improvements. So some of the restriping, some other short-term improvements that weren't on this presentation, but I know were in the memo, or considering improving some of the light conditions at the intersection, because a few of the crashes there were, you know, nighttime crashes, and retiming the signal. And I know, you know, going forward, doing any sort of other improvements to the intersection, there will be coordination with MassDOT and the DCR, specifically with that parking lot there. I mean, I do think the short-term improvements for now will improve like safety as far as crashes are concerned. Obviously, yeah, it's any sort of crosswalk implementation that you would want to put there would have to go through longer, more in-depth analysis and design work.
Rebecca?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Jen, for your comments. I just wanted to follow up on some of Julie's points. I totally appreciate your comment about the timing of the collection of data, and that was something that we noted as from a seasonal standpoint, as you said, in Hull and that intersection. It's really looking at the seasonal, the summer months, and so a recommendation would be to do that further data collection as this project moves forward. The other thing I just want to note is that this is really the first step in the process of just starting to get stakeholders together and start throwing concepts together for kind of an initial kind of project initiation. And there's a lot more analysis that needs to be done before any specific recommendations are made. So I just wanted to point out, I think, you know, we did receive the letter from the town of Hull that's been attached to the memo with some concerns about, you know, some of the concepts that were proposed. And so that goes, you know, that will move forward in the next step, considering, you know, what concepts actually make sense for this intersection. So it's just so early on in the process. Part of, you know, the purpose of this work is really getting stakeholders together to start having the conversation. So I don't think any of the recommendations here are final, or we're saying that these are the exact proposed concepts that need to move forward, but hopefully that helped the town kind of initiate some of the conversations. And there's obviously a lot of additional work that needs to be done before anything goes into design.
Thanks, Rebecca. Christopher DeLorio.
All right, thank you. First off, I just want to thank Julie, CTPS, DOT, MPO, everybody that's been looking at this intersection. It's been great. It's been on our radar for a lot of years, and it's great to finally see some recommendations coming out of this. So I was just wondering about when we're talking about short-term versus long-term improvements out there, and these recommendations. So are the short-term recommendations, are that something that still needs additional study as well, or are those are something that's ready to go, we're ready to move forward with?
Most of the short-term recommendations are things that you could move forward with. The only ones, you know, are that might be more cost prohibitive things, like I said, like lighting. I don't know what all you can do, but like that is something that might need more discussion. But yeah, most of them you could move forward with, or
okay.
Yeah.
just so, just as a follow-up to that, this is a DOT roadway, so so I assume that DOT would be the ones implementing these short-term improvements. How do we, is that something we move forward with them, or is that something that we take care of, or how does that work?
I will be honest, I don't know if I can answer that. I mean, a lot of them are minor, like, you know, some repainting the faded markings on the roadway, and signal retiming. I don't know if someone from MassDOT could answer that better for you, Chris. I don't think I can answer that.
Okay.
Michelle Tyler, oh, Marie Rose, can you answer that?
Yeah, am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I would suggest, so I missed the beginning of this. How did this study get initiated originally? Like, where did the impetus from it come from?
Chris reached out to us and asked us if we could do a study here.
Oh, all right, perfect. So I guess it depends. I would encourage the town to talk to the District 5 office, Pam Hasner, project development engineer, to see if it is a priority for MassDOT. I don't know off the top of my head these locations, and we probably would support initiating a project, which just be a question of would MassDOT be the proponent or the town of Hull be the proponent.
Okay. All right, great. I'll reach out to her. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Michelle Tyler Randolph.
Good morning. I just wanted to say thank you to Julie and the team who worked on the study in Randolph. I appreciate the challenges that they faced in trying to collect data from the team here at the town. So the fact that they were able to provide a comprehensive review and report into the town is appreciative. The study area is incredibly challenging as this particular location is very much a pass-through for other communities coming off of Route 93 South to reach other communities, adjacent communities such as Avon, Holbrook, and Abington. So we have a very high traffic count, and chaos is a polite word to use for it. So we are appreciative and hoping to incorporate this into some other long-term solutions. We actually just today submitted a complete streets policy to MassDOT for review and approval. So hopefully we can incorporate these in our prioritization plan as well. So thank you, Julie and team. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Tyler. Any other comments or questions on this one? Marie Rose.
Sorry, I was thinking Hull. I forgot about Randolph. So Hull is in District 5 and Randolph is in District 6. So if Randolph wants to pursue a project through MassDOT and potentially put it on the tip, they should coordinate with Erin Kinahan, who is the project development engineer in District 6. So Hull is Pam Hasner. Randolph would be Erin Kinahan.
Thank you, Marie.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions for Julie? Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Next item is a presentation of the Route 1 Priority Corridor Study in Norwood, Massachusetts. Seth Asante. Whenever you're ready, Seth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Seth Asante, and I will be presenting the Route 1 Priority Corridor Study. The Priority Corridor Studies address arterial roadways identified in the MPO Long Range Transportation Plan as in need of improvements. MPO staff have conducted several priority corridor studies, and they have been well received by the municipalities and MassDOT because they provide them what will be required to address deficiencies in those corridors. Next slide, please. For this presentation, I will provide a brief overview of the study and then proceed to talk about the existing conditions and the results of a community survey that provided staff with input from the public. Later in the presentation, I will describe the corridor needs and ideas for improvements, and we'll conclude the presentations with the next steps and key points for consideration. Next slide, please. Through the study, we identified several opportunities that will increase safety conditions for all users, transform an automobile-centric corridor to serve all users, expand and improve access and mobility by connecting people to places. Additional opportunities that came out of the study include new infrastructure proposals to support future transit services, first and last mile connectivity to the employment centers along Route 1. The improvement will also enhance economic vitality and will also benefit transportation equity populations within the corridor. Next slide, please. The study corridor includes Route 1 in Norwood, which is shown in the gray buffer. To the west of the corridor are the MBTA Franklin commuter rail line and also bus route 34E, which runs parallel to Route 1. There are 3 commuter rail stations in Norwood: Windsor Gardens, Norwood Central, and Norwood Depot, all within a mile from the Route 1 corridor. To the east of the study corridor are Interstate 95 and the MBTA Providence-Stoughton commuter rail line, with stations at Canton Junction and also University Avenue in Westwood. The corridor is about 4 miles long and is under MassDOT jurisdiction. Next slide, please. MPO staff selected the Route 1 in Norwood for study because of the need to improve safety and make it multimodal. The corridor has several high crash locations. Access and mobility are poor due to lack of walking and biking infrastructure. There is no transit service on Route 1, although it has a lot of employment centers along it. Next slide, please. Recently, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council completed the Neponset Valley Route 1 and Route 1A corridor mobility study for the Neponset Valley Transportation Management Association. They evaluated job access and mobility in those corridors and identified potential pathways to improve transit options in the Route 1 corridor. The study proposal included a near-term recommendation of new and expanded microtransit services in the area, and a long-term revitalization and redesign of Route 1 to make it more walking and biking friendly, and also in order to support transit services. This MPO study addresses the Route 1 redesign. Next slide, please. Community engagement is a crucial part of priority corridor study. An advisory task force composed of representatives from these agencies was established to guide the study. The task force provided local knowledge, expertise, reviewed findings, and provided feedback. MPO staff met with the task force, presented the existing conditions and improvements for feedback. We also launched a community survey to gather input from the public for the study. Next slide, please. For the next few slides, I will provide a brief overview of the existing condition, problems, and the corridor needs. Next slide, please. Could you please play the first? Thank you. Route 1 in Norwood is a two-way, four-lane divided principal arterial. It's a state-designated track route and part of the national highway system. The right-of-way varies between 85 feet and 120 feet wide. The travel lanes are 11 foot wide and the shoulder width varies between 6 and 10 feet wide. The speed regulations in the corridor are 45 miles per hour south of the Neponset Circle, also called the Pendergast Circle, and 50 miles per hour north of the circle. Next video, please. Route 1 is a major highway business corridor. The land uses in the corridor is a mixture of automobile-related businesses, health and technology industries, manufacturing, office parks, and commercial areas. The land uses in the corridor are also undergoing redistricting and rezoning in response to current and future needs. Next slide, please. Route 1 carries between 32,000 vehicles to 46,000 vehicles per day, with the highest volume in the northern portion of the corridor. The roadway serves regional and local traffic, and a sizable portion of the traffic is local, with destinations in Norwood and the surrounding communities. Also, a substantial portion is regional commuter traffic heading towards the Boston metro area and the Route 128 corridor. Next slide. Okay. Accessibility and mobility in Route 1 corridor is challenging. About 90% of the northbound direction has no sidewalks. In the southbound direction, it's about 60%. They are shown with the orange dashed lines. Many of the side streets in the corridor have sidewalk, shown with the green color, but they do not connect to any sidewalk on Route 1. The numbers shown in the blue circles are the walking volumes that were collected when we were collecting the traffic counts data. Those in the orange circles are also the biking volumes. The black double arrows are the locations where people walking or biking can cross Route 1 safely, only at the signalized intersections. In the 4-mile corridor, there are 6 safe crossing opportunities, and the distance between crossings can be as long as 1.6 miles, especially in the northern portion of the corridor. And as I mentioned earlier, there is no first mile and last mile connections from the commuter rail stations and bus stops to the corridor. Next slide, please. There were 613 crashes over the 5-year period from 2015 to 2019. 75% of the crashes occurred at the intersections, and they are shown in the orange circles. 25% of the crashes occurred on the segments, and they are shown in the blue circles. All 5 signalized intersections in the corridor are HZIP eligible crash clusters. There wasn't any fatality, but 28% of the crashes involve injury, and 5 of the crashes involve people biking and walking. Also, 26% of the crashes occurred at night conditions. Next slide, please. We launched the community survey that provided us with the people's perception of the corridor and ideas to improve access and safety. Nearly 700 people responded to the survey. About 77% of the respondents drive alone. 20% drive or travel as a passenger, and 3% walk or bike in the corridor. 86% of the respondents also believe that the existing conditions in the corridor are not close to their vision for the corridor and it needs improvements. Next slide, please. This chart shows the public's perception of safety, driving, walking, and biking in the corridor. The green color indicates safe conditions, and the orange and red color indicate unsafe conditions, and the light blue color for neutral. About 70% of the respondents feel it is safe driving in the corridor. However, 80% of the respondents also believe that it's unsafe walking or biking in the corridor, which are shown in the second and third column. About 60% of the respondents also have a neutral opinion on taking the bus in the corridor, although there is no transit service in the corridor. Next slide, please. These heat maps were generated when respondents were asked to click on a map to show the locations where you feel unsafe walking or driving in the corridor. For driving, which is shown to the left-hand side, people feel unsafe at the signalized intersection. For walking and biking, which is shown to the right, people feel unsafe both at the intersection and on the segments between them, which is shown by the green color linking the hot spots. Next slide, please. Finally, we asked in the survey respondents to give us 2 ways to improve Route 1. These are the top 5 improvements to address the corridor visions and also needs. Adding safer crossing opportunities and walking and biking infrastructure. Improving safety conditions for all users. Expanding and enhancing access for all, and also providing a welcoming environment for all users. Next slide, please. For short-term improvements that we identified in the corridor are low-cost short-term improvements. They are simple and uncomplicated, as in the corridor presently is mostly automobile-centric. The short-term improvement can be funded or included in maintenance projects or projects along the corridor. Next slide, please. For the short-term walking and biking accommodations, the improvement include adding pedestrian signals to the side streets, upgrading the signal equipment to include countdown timers, installing pedestrian refuge island for the long crosswalks across Route 1, and also installing ADA compliant curb ramps and curb cuts for the crosswalks and sidewalks in the corridor. Next slide, please. For the short-term safety and operational improvements, they include retiming the signals with current data to reduce congestion, upgrading the signal equipment such as adding yellow retro reflective backplates, changing post-mounted left-hand signals on Route 1 to overhead signals to improve visibility and safety. Also improving wayfinding, advanced notification signs, and also improving street lighting to increase safety. Next slide, please. The long-term improvements address vision and also feature needs of the corridor. They will require design, engineering, and larger funding sources. Next slide, please. The long-term improvements include new sidewalk to close the substantial gaps in the sidewalk network, sidewalk level separated bike lanes to accommodate people biking, additional safe crossing opportunities to provide greater east-west access, and creating a welcoming environment for all users by adding more streets and also incorporating green infrastructure improvements, and also complete street improvements on the local streets as proposed by the Norwood Complete Street Program. Next slide, please. These are the various types of improvements proposed for the corridor. Separated bike lane in each direction of Route 1. New crossing opportunities north of the corridor, which is shown by the double red arrows. Intersection improvements shown by the orange circles. Pedestrian improvements at Pendergast Circle and future redesign of the interchange shown by the orange triangle, and complete street improvements on the local street as proposed by the town of Norwood, shown in the dashed lines. Next slide, please. The transformation of Route 1 will likely include cross-sectional modification of the roadway. This will involve using portions of the existing shoulder, median, and also narrowing travel lanes to construct the improvements. As this multimodal improvement go into the corridor, Mazda should reconsider the speed regulations in context with the multimodal transportation modes that comes into the corridor. Also, the improvement that we proposed could also incorporate green infrastructure improvements in the corridor to reduce urban heat index and also pollution. Next slide, please. These are examples of green infrastructure improvement that can be incorporated into the proposed improvements in the median, in the separated bike lane, permeable pavements, stormwater planters, and also curb extensions. Next slide, please. In the next two slides, I will talk about the next steps and the key points for consideration. Next slide, please. The next steps after this planning study are for stakeholder coordination with MassDOT to advance the study recommendations into projects. This will require prioritizing the improvements and initiating projects. The study report also provides useful information for the project initiation process. Next slide, please. Also, this study meets the MPO goals established in the long-range transportation plan. Route 1 abuts and runs through several transportation equity neighborhoods in Norwood, And these improvements will provide an increased safety, mobility, and access for those neighborhoods. The improvement will also support future transit initiatives, such as micro-transit and first route transit on Route 1, and also help in first mile and last mile connections from the MBTA, commuter rail station, and bus Route 34E service to the Route 1 corridor. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Questions? Lynn Diggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks for asking me. Good work again, and thanks again for joining us yesterday. You on page 90, it's the table 6 where you have the safety effectiveness of the proposed improvements. You give some estimates for the crash reduction, and I'm kind of curious as how you got those numbers.
If I can go, can you take me back to the safety numbers? You mean the crash safety numbers?
So no, this is in the
Crash
report itself.
reduction.
Crash reduction. So it's on page 90 of the report.
The question, Seth, is how do you estimate crash reduction that will result from the improvements you propose?
Oh, okay. Okay.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Yeah, the crash reduction from the safety improvements, we usually get it from what we call crash modification factors. For several kinds of improvements, there have been before and after studies that have measured crash safety improvement that results from crash analysis. And from this, there is an established website that provides us information. Let's say if you add a left turn to prevent, let's say, protected, to provide protected left turn, we have a before and after study that gives us an estimate of the number of crashes that you'll be able to reduce. So this is where we get our crash reduction information, from the crash reduction factors.
That's wonderful. I was hoping the answer would be something like that. And if sometime you can throw me that link, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, I'll do that.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Eric Barassa.
Thank you, Seth. I think this is great. I know, I know from conversations in the past, further north, like in Dedham, I know the town up there would love to see sort of a taming of Route 1 and make it more, pedestrian friendly, and for the ability for people to kind of walk along it and to cross, Route 1. Right now, it's almost impossible to cross. I'm just wondering, in your conversations with the town officials, did they talk about any sort of like redevelopment of the corridor in association with sort of this re-envisioning of Route 1? Right now, the land uses are very commercial, lots and lots of parking lots, and just wondering if any land use considerations were also discussed as part of this.
Yeah, in Norwood, they were working on redistricting and rezoning the land uses within the corridor to address current and future needs. And I think they are also looking at making the corridor multimodal so that new developments or new land uses that will be proposed will be able to take advantage of the multimodal mobility that will come into the corridor. And also the study proposals from this study can also be extended to Westwood and Dedham also to take advantage and improve mobility.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Tom O'Rourke.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to thank Seth and his team for doing this. We worked with them along the way in the town, and yeah, I'll reiterate what Eric said about the difficulties with the safeties in the area. So a lot of this is really exciting to see, and hopefully it can be implemented over time to help people navigate the area. But just wanted to say thank you, and I was going to respond about the zoning, but I see Sarah's here and she can do a much better job on that than I can.
Thank you, Tom. We will go to Sarah Dixon Bouchard.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, so the town meeting in Norwood did rezone the Boston Providence Highway to create a new Boston Providence Highway district last year. That did create 2 new mixed use overlays, one around the Vanderbilt corridor on the kind of southern side of our stretch of Route 1, and then also in the northern gateway where University Ave and Everett Streets come through near the Westwood border. Creating kind of a consolidated zoning up and down Route 1 was able to yield some improvements that further the goals in this study. We're talking about, larger right-of-way spaces where car storage is not permissible to kind of reduce that parking lot effect right up to the right of way. Also, a series of significant landscaping improvements and step back requirements for signage to kind of reduce the scale of that, and also to support, again, better transit and sidewalk access for pedestrians. So we are supportive of these goals. To your point, I think a regional approach is always going to be helpful, and we would look forward to communicating with neighboring communities here, but we are consistent with these goals, and we're hopeful for the future.
Thank you. Marie Rose.
Hi, yeah, that was a great presentation. I love the videos too. Can someone tell me who in District 5 you coordinated with on this study? I was just curious about the peoples, just so that I can touch base with them.
Yeah, Pam Hasna was very much involved when we were initiating the study. I contacted her and she also said it's a good study to pursue. There were several members from Highway District 5, including Barbara Lachance, David Soares, Shell Senia, and the rest. So District 5 was quite involved in the study.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I was just wondering. And then the other thing is, we do have a TIP project in 2026, the intersection of Route 1 and University Avenue, Everett Street, which you're probably aware of.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Any other questions for Seth? Seeing none, great job as always, Seth. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I believe the next item on our agenda is member items. Are there any? Amira Patterson, do you have a member item?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I wish to note that the MBTA Advisory Board met on December 13th to consider the recommendations for its Rapid Transit Committee on bus network redesign. The 176 communities represented by the advisory board reached an actual consensus on the report of the bus network redesign. And in summary, the cities and towns agreed on the following points in no particular order, just to note. So 1, as per the service delivery policy, requires the MBTA staff to return annually to update the board of directors, MBTA advisory board, Boston Regional MPO, and the public on bus network redesign implementations, and seek additional 12-month authorization based on benchmark achievements. 2, the board of directors and MPO should require T staff to evaluate expected ridership gains to ensure that state law climate targets, internal performance metrics are achieved before moving on to the new phases. 3, require an implementation plan tied to bus transformation, the agency-wide staffing plan, and with capital and operating costs, milestones, and regular check-ins. 4, ensure that the estimated operating cost includes adequate estimates for added management and support staff to create a service that can attract net new riders. And finally, 5, develop a long-term vision for the bus transformation network that envisions a larger fleet capable of meeting the region's growth needs, which considers a 10%, 20%, 33%, and 50% larger fleet, and what its effects may be. So thank you for that, Mr. Chair, and happy holidays to everyone.
Thank you. Lynn?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. If we had more time, I would ask that we would have a non-binding resolution that would stop Sandy from leaving, but we don't have time. So I'll just say, thanks, Sandy, for all your work, and see you around.
Thanks, Lynn. Tom Bent?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to take a second. I think everyone knows the GLX project. I think had its final ribbon cutting this week. And I just wanted to take a second to thank you, Mr. Chair, for guiding the MPO through the process for many years. And all the current board members and the past board members that have been working on this for at least a decade, and all of our staff at CTPS. I just wanted to take a minute to thank you. The grand opening was at Tufts Cummings Center, which is a brand new building that's built basically in, I guess the station is in front of the building, and it's all glass wall. And where the presentations were from all the speakers, from the governor and the congressman and all that, it was a great backdrop. You could see people coming down onto the platform, the elevators going up and down, and a surprise, they named the governor is naming the Green Line Maintenance Facility here in Innerbelt and Somerville after Mike Capuano, the congressman for the area at the time. So again, I just wanted to thank everyone. It was a great day, great to see, and somebody from the T challenged Tufts students to show up at the Tufts station at 4:30 in the morning to take the first train ride. And they called his bluff. I guess there were over 300 people, 300 students there. So I talked to the VP at Tufts and I said, I'm sure they figured out some kind of drinking party beforehand to get there. So, but they all had a great time, I guess. And it was a great grand opening for the T. So again, just wanted to thank everyone. It was a lot of work and a lot of time over the years.
Thank you, Tom. And it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. Obviously, none of it would have happened without the city's yeoman work throughout the entire 2 decades or plus. So thank you, Tom.
Thank
There
you.
is someone who's identified on my screen as iPhone 2 with her hand raised.
It's Dennis. It's Dennis.
Hi, Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just 2 comments. One is I just wanted to recognize Tom Bent for all the things that he did to make the Green Line extension work and advocate to this board for many years. So I think without Tom, we wouldn't have learned nearly as much and have as much information on that project. So I just wanted to recognize Tom and thank him for his advocacy. Second one, I just wanted to announce that the Framingham portion of the Bruce Freeman Trail, the city signed a PNS with CSX last week. So there's a 3.5 mile now extension that's going to connect to Sudbury to further along the Bruce Freeman Trail. So that's good news.
That's excellent news. Congratulations. Any other items to be announced at this time? Hearing and seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to adjourn? And please state your name for the record when making the motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn. Eric Barassa, MAPC.
Thank you, Tom Bent.
And I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Motion having been made and seconded. We are adjourned. I'll see everybody at our next meeting. Thanks, guys.
Take care, everyone.